I'd like to introduce my friend Otto Kyler. Otto from Kyler Food Pro, renowned appraiser. Otto has a specialty in the food and food processing industry. How you doing, man?
I'm good, David.
Just like to talk a little bit about some current events. So, here we are, we're in a pandemic, and some industries are sinking. Some industries are swimming. A lot of places are treading water to keep that theme. What are you seeing right now in the equipment values, particularly, and what are you seeing in the food processing space?
You and I have worked on a couple of projects during the pandemic that are in the food processing space, but they're off to the side. If you want to talk about the core of the food processing, which could be meat, poultry, fruit and vegetable, beverage, those types of things, most of this comes down to pandemic-related access. For example, let me go to an extreme. There's been a lot of activity in craft brewing over the last, that was coming anyway before, as we came into January, February, we had been calling craft brewing, bubble was bursting already before we got to 2020. And then this just kind of put a nail in the coffin only because the mandates require that people couldn't go in there, especially for those that were restaurants.
Those would be micro breweries rather than craft. I think that the tier is a little different. Not that the craft brewing industry isn't suffering a little trouble, but particularly those brew pubs, those smaller ones. A lot of states that can't even open yet.
That's exactly right, and that's where I'm talking about. So, craft brewery is an appropriate term, but you're right. Microbrewery would be a food service location typically, and because people can't go in there and still really can't go in there at full capacity, most people rely on the kind of profit margins that require 100% occupancy when they can get it and doing the best they can. So anything less than that is going to hurt their bottom line. And ultimately, if they were struggling to begin with, so that's more your side of the industry. So we've seen that. We've seen, since February, either things that you and I have discussed and things that are online that have come across my desk. 12, 14, there's probably more that we don't know about, right? All around the country. So that's what's happening there. To switch to the main core of the food industry, the meat, poultry, beverage, vegetables, the things that we buy on a regular day basis that come through our refrigerator, anything that comes through our kitchen or pantry or refrigerator is doing exceptionally well. That segment of the industry is, if you look at some of the data, arguably, you'll find that the retail side of the food industry, meaning retail foods in a supermarket to keep our household going. Now that kids are at home, college kids even are at home. So there's an increase in the acquisition and stocking. We won't even talk about hoarding, but the stocking of our pantries. That part is doing phenomenally well and is the industry, the fresh food and processed food industries. From that perspective, is the 1 and 2 best industries to benefit from the pandemic or the results of the pandemic.
So vis-a-vis that increased demand because we're all home cooking, and I know my personal grocery bills have gone up. Because of that, we extrapolate that there's a strength in the equipment market value as well. Because as these factories have to ramp up, stuff breaks, they need to source a new piece, and so there's more activity going on, and that supports the value essentially of the collateral, which is really what we're talking about here, is we're talking about the bank's collateral. So there's support, from what I'm hearing you say, there's support in the collateral value for food processing equipment throughout the pandemic.
Correct. I would say that if anything, the market has improved. Even with or without the pandemic, the market has improved. But I don't want to get bogged down in it, but the other side of the retail is the institutional. So those companies that have equipment installed that support a base or products that go to restaurants or institutions, because we toured Cornell University last weekend, and it's a ghost town. There's no food service at Cornell University. They have hundreds or thousands of students, right? Most high schools, at least in New York State that I'm aware of, those things aren't happening. So things that are packaged in large containers for institutional use, number 10 cans, things like that. That part of their business, if they do retail and institutional, that part is slowed down. So to your point about equipment, the equipment that is geared toward institutional, not so good. So
great points. They're both food, but they're completely different silos.
That's exactly right. And you have to separate that in this situation. To your question regarding the pandemic, the market is not there. I'll give you one example. We appraised a large Apple processor. They had 5 factories. And so the follow-up to that was, how are you guys doing with all these different plants and all these different lines? They had 20 different lines. And that was, they're moving all of their resources from the institutional side to the retail side, converting what they can to push their products that are the best sellers from a retail example. And those little applesauce cups are, terrific to have in the house for kids, just to give them a snack and things like that. So people are stocking up on those, but their institutional lines, they're just like sitting there doing nothing. Will it ultimately kill the value of that? I mean, if that's a question, I don't think so. I think we have to kind of see what happens with that, but there's going to be a pent up demand. So as soon as we get back to 100% occupancy, hospitals, visitors can't, to some extent it's there, but it's not there at the capacity. Once those things come back online, all that equipment is going to have to come back online, and everybody knows that. So if they mothball it for a year, then that's not unreasonable. I don't think that kills the value, unless there's a default now. I think this is your question. If there's a default right now, and we have to take this to market in the next 90 days, institutional equipment would be bought on speculation, not for immediate use.
You and I have been in thousands and thousands of factories over the years. And most of these companies, unless they're really, really big, any individual site will have anything from, a small PC all the way up to 5-gallon buckets, right, of ketchup and everything in the same factory. Some companies do segregate for an institutional plant or a consumer plant. But it's been my experience that there's usually, as you pointed out, a couple of lines or 3 lines, and they can pivot that particular facility to fill the needs of the marketplace at any given time. So you're seeing that the institutional packaging sizes have been mothballed and the focus has gone to consumer. If that does change, and when that does change, do you see that there's going to be a maintenance issue with the institutional equipment that's been offline for, maybe 6 months now?
I don't think so. The companies that we deal with, they have good maintenance programs, good preventative maintenance programs, and they won't overlook that, because any management would sit in meetings with the maintenance team and go, all right, so what are you guys doing about the institutional stuff? We still have to run that and grease that they have protocols for that.
Right.
So no, I don't see that as a problem. Machinery does like to run. So I think if the mothballing goes on for a period of time, and it depends on the environment. So I guess there's a what if there. Depends on the environment. If it's an outdoor environment, you don't run something, that rust and, just dry
catches up
seals
really quickly.
Yeah. Like a car, you let a car sit for a year and you start it back up, there's going to be a problem with it. So I think there is some to that, but I think that this economic situation that we're talking about, specifically about the marketing of institutional food machinery, is going to be, I'm not saying short-lived. I think there's another year in this. I think we're status quo on this conversation for another year before things start to really fire back up from an institutional side. But that's just my personal opinion based on the true or false news that I've heard.
Otto Keiler, my good friend, my associate, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.